Welcome to the Economist in Your Ear podcast. Can the food on your table actually be trusted? And I'm not talking about public safety scares here, more about quality, about what cooking even means anymore. It's a surprisingly tricky question, and it's right at the center of this huge food controversy that just blew up in China. It's all focused on a really popular restaurant chain called Xibei. They're known for, that hearty Northwestern Chinese food.
Right. And what made this a national news story wasn't a health issue, like you said. It was this outcry over authenticity, expectations maybe, especially in these massive, fast-growing cities.
Yeah, it seems like the whole debate really hit a nerve. It touches on class, convenience, and this sort of industrial creep into the idea of a home-cooked traditional meal.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how quickly our definitions of fresh or made to order can, blur when a country urbanizes at the speed China has. The Xibei thing is like a big public stress test on how we feed millions in cities today.
Okay, so let's get into it. How did this all kick off? It started pretty small, right? Just one social media comment.
Yeah, but from a big name. Luo Yonghao, he's this entrepreneur, a huge influencer, like 1.4 million followers. He posted this really sharp comment, basically blasting Xibei.
What did he say?
He accused them of serving expensive pre-made dishes. In Chinese, the term is yuzikai. And that term, yuzikai, that became the real flashpoint.
So yuzikai is like prepackaged stuff you just heat up?
Pretty much.
Oh.
Prepared dishes, packaged, needing maybe minimal assembly or just reheating right before they serve it. And Xibei, well, they're not some small cafe. We're talking nearly 400 locations, pulling in over 6 billion yuan a year.
Wow, okay, so they're huge. How did they react?
Oh, they fought back hard. The owner, Jia Gulong, he was really defensive, threatened lawsuits, defamation claims.
Right.
And then he did something quite bold or maybe foolish. He invited people, the public, critics, to come and walk through his kitchens to prove everything was fresh and above board.
Ah, and based on what we read, that invitation maybe backfired.
Yeah. Massively. Because people took him up on it. The internet accepted the challenge, you could say. And what they found behind those open kitchen windows, it felt like a complete betrayal.
A betrayal of what, exactly? Their image.
Precisely. Xibei works really hard on this image. It's all about field-fresh nourishment. The restaurants look rustic, lots of wood, those red and white gingham cloths.
Yeah, I've seen pictures. Very wholesome looking.
Totally. And they have screens playing videos of chefs like lovingly kneading dough, doing all this traditional prep work. Very hands-on.
Okay, but the reality.
The reality people saw on these tours, frozen broccoli with a 2-year shelf life.
2 years?
Yeah. And expensive soups that were basically just bouillon cubes or powder tossed into boiling water. And the staff doing this, minimal chef training. It wasn't cooking, it was assembly.
So those open kitchen windows weren't showing chefs creating dishes from scratch. They were showing reheating and plating.
Pretty much just the final steps. And the customers felt misled. We saw this quote from one diner, a Mr. Yu, which kind of summed it up. He said he was pleased, but not enough to boycott it.
Interesting. So, annoyed, but still practical.
Exactly, because he acknowledged, look, pre-made dishes are convenient. His point was they should indicate that they are made this way. It boiled down to transparency, disclosure.
Right. Not stop doing this, but tell us you're doing this.
That's the crux of it. It shows the real tension isn't necessarily a rejection of convenience food itself. It's this clash between the romance of traditional made-from-scratch cooking and the, unavoidable realities of feeding millions of people in packed cities every single day.
Let's zoom out to that context then.
Yeah.
Why is Xibei using central kitchens and pre-made stuff so much now? And why is this such a hot topic in China specifically?
It really comes down to urbanization. The sheer speed and scale of it in China is, unprecedented. Think about it. Just 15 years ago, China was majority rural. Now it's nearly 70% urban. And the government wants that number to go even higher soon.
Feeding that many city dwellers consistently.
Yeah.
That sounds like a massive logistical challenge.
It is. And that's where central kitchens and standardized pre-made ingredients become almost inevitable. You need consistency, affordability, and food safety at a scale that, frankly, thousands of tiny individual kitchens just can't provide reliably.
So the traditional idea, maybe like from that documentary, A Bite of China.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful show. Exquisite ingredients, idyllic farms.
That dream is just not feasible for your average city worker grabbing dinner.
No, usually no. Their reality is more likely finding a meal down the glossy corridor of a shopping mall, as The Economist put it. Quick, reliable, probably from a chain that relies heavily on standardized processes.
So it's this huge growing middle class, wanting good food conveniently, affordably.
Mm-hmm.
But the old ways of cooking just can't scale up to meet that demand.
That's the fundamental tension, and it's forcing a shift in the market. We looked at analysis from Zhang Dongliang, a cultural commentator. He predicts this leads to a kind of two-tier system.
Okay, what does that look like?
You'll have your big chains like Vey potentially becoming these super efficient, reliable, well, reheaters. They provide decent, consistent food at scale. And then alongside that, a smaller, upper tier.
Like fine dining.
Exactly. Proper chef-led restaurants focusing purely on fresh, premium ingredients, star chefs, probably high prices. It's a pattern you see in a lot of developed food markets already.
But hang on. The material also flags something interesting, almost counterintuitive, that pre-made food isn't all bad. It can actually be a great leveler.
Yes. And this is such an important point to counter the purely negative view. Think about a dish like Buddha jumps over the wall.
Ah, the famous one. Super complex, right? Takes ages to make.
Traditionally, yes. It's this incredibly elaborate Fujianese seafood stew. You'd usually need to order it a day in advance at a very high-end restaurant. Very expensive, totally inaccessible for most people.
Okay.
But now, thanks to better central kitchens, better freezing tech, better logistics, you can find decent pre-made versions of it. In supermarkets, even some casual restaurants.
So you're saying the industrialized version makes a luxury item democratic?
In a way, yeah. It might not be quite the same as the version that took a master chef 24 hours to prepare, but it's often a very good approximation. It brings this incredibly complex, culturally significant dish within reach of ordinary people. That accessibility is actually a pretty amazing outcome of industrial food production.
That's a really interesting angle. But it brings us back to the ZB anger. If convenience is good, and accessibility is good, and the pre-made stuff can even be a decent approximation, why were people so furious? You said it was disclosure.
Right.
So doesn't that suggest this isn't some deep cultural rejection of modern food? It sounds more like the rules haven't kept up, like a regulatory problem.
I think that's exactly right. When you dig into the commentary, the main demand is for clear labeling. Honesty. People aren't necessarily saying ban central kitchens, most probably realize they're needed. They're saying, tell us what we're eating and what we're paying for.
Which points towards regulation needing to catch up. Is it?
It is, but there's been this gray area. The government put out draft regulations in 2024, 2025, trying to define yuzukai, pre-made food.
Okay.
They defined it mainly as those reheatable, prepackaged meals you might buy yourself. But, and this is key, they specifically excluded stuff coming from a restaurant's own central kitchen or ingredients that were just, say, pre-cut or pre-prepped centrally.
Ah, so that's the loophole. Zubei could argue their centrally prepped broccoli wasn't technically yuzukai under that draft definition.
Precisely. They were operating in that ambiguity. The likely intent of the rules was maybe focused on third-party meal kits, but it allowed restaurants to assemble centrally made components and still call it freshly made without full disclosure.
So you expect those definitions to get tighter?
Almost certainly. The regulators are definitely aware of this issue now. You'll likely see stricter definitions and clearer triggers for when a restaurant has to label something as involving pre-prepared elements.
And we should probably challenge the idea that central kitchens automatically mean worse food, right? Sometimes it's the opposite.
Absolutely. A well-run central kitchen can actually raise standards, especially for safety. They can implement proper HACCP procedures. That's the Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point System. Very rigorous.
So more controls than a small independent place might have.
Often, yes. They can afford better equipment, enforce strict cold chain management, ensure ingredient consistency across hundreds of outlets. It standardizes safety protocols. The real weak points in food safety are often the very small operators who lack resources, not necessarily the big chains with centralized prep. The issue is transparency and auditing of those central hubs.
And the fact that Chibi is still around, even expanding internationally, they opened in LA recently, that suggests the model itself isn't broken.
Exactly. The food clearly has appeal. The operational side works. What needs to change is adapting to these new consumer demands for transparency, being upfront about the process.
Which brings us back to the money. You mentioned earlier that a lot of the anger seemed tied to the price.
Yes, I think the value for money argument was huge here. If you position yourself as premium, use that field-fresh imagery and charge accordingly.
Then people expect premium labor and ingredients, not just reheating.
Right. The expectation is much higher than if you market yourself honestly as, say, an efficient, reliable, convenient chain using centralized prep to keep costs down. The price has to match the process, or at least the disclosed process.
So if you sort of wrap this up for you, the listener, this whole Sabi saga is really a textbook case. It's a modernizing food market driven by massive urbanization, trying to figure out how to align what customers expect with what they're actually getting. It's about information.
Yeah, and the market will figure it out. So looking ahead, what are the key things you should watch for? How will this evolve? I think there are three main indicators.
Okay, what's the first?
First, keep an eye on those category definitions. How will the government refine what actually counts as pre-made or centrally prepared in a way that triggers mandatory disclosure for restaurants? That legal definition is crucial.
Makes sense. What's second?
Second is the rollout of labeling norms. What will that disclosure actually look like? Will it be icons on the menu, QR codes linking to ingredient sourcing, maybe even those kitchen cam live streams becoming more common? How does transparency become practical?
Right, the how. And the third indicator.
Third, watch how chains start using transparency as a selling point, as a competitive advantage. Because urban growth means the demand for large-scale dining isn't going away. The winners will likely be those who are honest about their processes and build trust that way.
So embracing the reality of central kitchens, but being upfront about it.
Exactly. Which leaves us with that bigger, maybe more philosophical question relevant not just in China, but globally. If we accept that industrialized food production is basically essential to feed our huge growing cities affordably and safely, what's the cultural trade-off? What's the price we pay in terms of, I don't know, tradition, culinary diversity, maybe even the very definition of cooking for all that efficiency and convenience? It's a balancing act every major city is grappling with.
A fascinating thought to end on. Thanks for listening. Follow us for daily insights into world affairs, and don't forget to like, comment, and share.